At the beginning, I wanted to encourage everyone, give us a review of this podcast or our podcast in general on Google My Business. And that link is in the show notes. Just click on that link. You'll have to sign into your Gmail account or your Google account. And then give us some feedback on this episode or the podcast overall. I'm trying to do an alternative to giving reviews in Apple Podcasts and just do it on Google. So the link is in the show notes. You'll have to sign into your Google account and give us a review.
Other great things with veterans, when you upload your resume to OhioMeansJobs, you go to the top of every search. So if an employer's out there just searching skill sets and zip codes, as a veteran, you go to the top of every search in that employer's database, and there's a big red, white, and blue V right next to your name that shows that you're a veteran candidate and you're at the top of the search. So just tons of great stuff they do for veterans, the veteran job seeker on that side.
We are looking forward our way from Studio C in the 511 Studios in the Brewery District, south of downtown Columbus. Hi, this is Brett. With me is my co-host, Carol.
Thank you so much. And, today we are going to really have a wonderful opportunity on a very special topic. We're going to talk about veterans today, honoring Veterans Day, to let everybody know what the services and opportunities are. And our guest, Ryan Blackburn, is the manager of the Veteran Workforce Development for the Ohio Department of Veterans Services. Ryan, thanks so much for visiting us today.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Brett, for having me. My title is kind of a mouthful there, but
yes,
you got it out perfectly, so that's great. No, thanks for having me.
As long as it fits on a business card, I guess you're all right.
Exactly. Well, and those of us in civilian service know how hard it is for military to talk about civilian service, and we have difficulty talking about military service. So
it goes both ways.
Right. So.
Well, over the past 20 years, I think we've gained a new perspective on the issues of our veterans. Much has changed since 9/11. Our country has a new perspective on both active military service as well as veterans coming home, many with dramatic needs. It seems that many of the veterans they range from 18 to 80 and older continue to struggle. Ryan is going to give us an overview of the issues and all the wonderful resources, programs, and services that we have here in Ohio. Ryan, let's start with an overview of your background and the role of the Ohio Department of Veterans Services.
Sure. So I am a native of Central Ohio. I grew up in Fairfield County. Shortly after high school, I joined the Air Force on active duty for 6 years as an intelligence analyst. Got to see the world. I lived in Germany for 3 years, Utah for 3 years, three deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I like to say they got their money's worth out of me for those 6 years. When I separated from the military in 2010, I came back and struggled with the transition back into the civilian world. And, that still goes on quite a bit. And there's a lot of reasons for why that happens. Everybody has their own story. Mine's a pretty common one. I was deployed 2 months before I came back to Ohio. So, working on the resume and doing the job hunting and, practicing my interview skills just wasn't happening. So when I came back to Ohio, I struggled with the transition a little bit. But I ended up finding work, eventually utilized my GI Bill benefits that I received in the military to get my degree at Ohio State. And then back in 2016, right as I was graduating, there was a new section of the Ohio Department of Veterans Services being stood up, where I currently work now. And what the state saw was, since 2010, since that, influx of veterans post, Iraq war, I think a lot of employers saw the value in adding veterans. There's you saw it all the time, right? The hire 100,000 veterans and, veterans are a great hire. So I think that word got out well. And then by the time 2015 and 2016 came around, it was, not so much I want to hire veterans, but how do I hire veterans? Where are they? How do I translate skills? So that's directly my role now for the last 5 years with the department. Instead of working, and we'll talk about, support for job seekers and things like that. But my role is really to work on the employer side, to work with the non-veteran HR staff and help them, understand what veteran resumes look like and how to translate skills, how to retain veterans and not just get them a job, but get them the right job, because we want veterans to stick around in employment as well. So that's my specific role within the Department of Veterans Services, but we have other great resources and benefits that I'm sure we'll touch on today. But ohiovets.gov will get you to all of it. There's links to benefits and links to resources. and everything in between. So that's kind of a great overview of just the department as a whole and my little niche within it.
Listeners, this is a really important conversation if you're a vet or you know a vet, and we are going to have our resources sheet attached to this podcast on our website, because there are just so many things that and organizations that can help vets. And I mean, it's critical. And it's difficult. This is a difficult step in terms of a veteran coming back into the civilian workforce. But I shout out to the Air Force. I have a young cousin who just got through basic and is on his way from Texas to California for his first assignment. So
that's great.
Go Air Force. So that's good. Anyway, okay. So Ryan, you and I began to work cooperatively in addressing the needs of veterans. When Brett and I were at our former agency, we were specifically at that point in time really looking at clients who are 50 and over, which that's a whole new ballgame when you're talking at that age. What I didn't realize, and doing some research on this for today, there are nearly 900,000 veterans in Ohio. Yep. We are the 6th highest in the U.S. in terms of number of vets in a state. That's a lot of people to take care of, just a lot of people, because you're really looking not just at the vets, but at their families.
Yep.
So Ohio has tremendous services, but I'm guessing it is a struggle to get the word out and to ensure that vets know there are benefits available other than just the GI Bill and healthcare. So let's start on my favorite topic, though, as employment and the work that you and the Veterans Workforce team do. So give us a little overview of the team, the goals you're trying to reach, changes that you've enacted, particularly during the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah, those are great questions. So like I said, we started this about 5 years ago now. And I say we have a regional team. So we're not just, I work in Columbus and cover an area. We have an office in Dayton that covers, kind of the western third, and also an office up in Akron to cover Northeast Ohio as well. So our job is to give free consultation to any employer, big, small, public, private, whatever it might be, and give them consultation advice on veteran recruiting, how to hire and onboard, and then ultimately retain that talent as well. Like I said earlier, we want veterans to get a job, but we also want them to get the right job that they're going to stay in as well. So that's really what we're here to do. We started 5 years ago. We had one presentation. We just called it our veteran hiring overview, and it had some best practices.
I think I heard that many, many times.
Yeah, just some general information. I'll be giving that presentation tomorrow morning. And it was just kind of our general presentation. As we started to get out there and get out into the state and start talking to employers, we would ask, what else do you want to learn about? And now we have 9 presentations. They're all accredited by the Society for Human Resource Management to provide free recertification credits to all these great HR personnel that want to learn more. But we have topics now ranging from just, hiring veterans to learning more about military culture. What does it mean to be an E5 staff sergeant in the Air Force? And how does that translate to the roles you're hiring for? To now presentations on how to manage veterans, how to interview veterans. That was one that kind of surprised me. We heard so often that from these HR staff that, interviewing a veteran is a little different. And it kind of shocked me. I'm like, really? Why? It's like, well, because they just talk about the team. Right. They're not talking about themselves. And that's how we're trained. And that's something I never really thought about. But yeah, you're there talking about all the great team accomplishments. When in the interview, you need to talk about yourself. Yes. And we're not trained to do that. So we have employer training on, how to unlock veterans during an interview and the right questions to ask and questions not to ask. Our latest one that we just developed right before the pandemic was on hiring military spouses and connecting with military families here in the States. So we have 9 topics now. We're always open for more as well. And, really that first 3 years or so before the pandemic started, it was a lot of traveling. We each have a state car and we put a lot of miles on it because we're going to employers all over the state, sitting down with them, going over job descriptions and pointing them in the right places to find veterans. Now, obviously, the pandemic changed a lot of that. Fortunately, in 2019, we started doing virtual online training sessions as well, one every month. We really ramped that up last year. We were doing 2 to 3 per month. We'd get 60, 70 people in attendance to these. Teaching the same topics, military culture, where to find veterans, how to translate skills. So it really worked well to move that to a virtual setting during the pandemic where we could still get our word out, right? So we're all much more savvy now on Microsoft Teams and Zooms and WebExes of the world. At the start of the pandemic, we were still figuring that stuff out, but now it just seems like so long ago, and we're all experts in that stuff now. So we still do the virtual trainings. I'm doing one tomorrow, actually. We still do one per month, back to the veteran hiring overview. But yeah, any employer can reach out to us and we'll be happy to connect one-on-one. And that's what we're here to do.
This is really a significant shift in thought over the past few years that it used to be where we were always trying to help veterans, do better resumes, do interviewing skills, all that. Because when I was still at one of my previous careers working with students, I had veterans who had come back to school. And actually, a couple of the guys were deployed while they were working with us in career services, which was I felt like a mom. I was really worried about them, and told them I'd send them most things in the mail. There were a few that I didn't feel comfortable sending them in the mail. Socks were okay.
There you go.
But to the idea that you could have a veteran client perfectly ready to be a great job seeker, but if an employer doesn't understand,
exactly,
then that's huge.
Yep. And there's still people out there. We have our partners at Job and Family Services, and, there's other great nonprofits out there working with veterans still on that.
Right.
There's still a need for that. But where our department saw kind of the gap here in the state was on that employer piece.
Right.
I mean, sometimes it's just, if you don't know, you don't know. And it's educating those HR staffs and hiring managers to better understand the candidates. That way, when they see a resume that looks a little funky, that has a lot of acronyms, they just don't throw it to the bottom of the pile. But now they know that, well, maybe this, I could just plug this into a skills translator real quick. And, maybe this is the most qualified candidate. I just need to decipher this a little bit. So kind of meet in the middle type thing.
Right.
Yep.
Well, to that end, you've got a strong relationship and partnership with OhioMeansJobs. You've created the Military Service Career Center, which provides services to both veterans as well as employers. Where do we start?
Yeah, so this is something that's new and something that's old, if that makes sense. Yeah, the OhioMeansJobs website, and there's an OhioMeansJobs physical center in all 88 counties across the state as well. They have specific veteran outreach specialists that work with nothing but veteran job seekers that have, significant barriers of entry into the workforce. So on top of that, they just redid their website, I want to say May or June of this year, so very recent. And it hasn't been redone since I've been an employee of the state for 5 years.
Right.
So it was due for a refresh, and they did a great job with it. Over time, websites they get a little cluttered, right? Things build up and resources get kind of buried behind other links, but not anymore. This is a nice, fresh, new look website, and we work very closely with them in building kind of the veterans portion of it. So you can go to it and find the Military Career Service Center, and you're going to find a lot of stuff for veteran job seekers. So if you need help with interviews, if you need help with your resume, if you want help searching for jobs, all of that's going to be on there. There's a military skills translator that you can plug in your MOS or your AFSC or whatever your job code was in the military, and it's going to translate it to the civilian world. Now, I always caution with using those. It's not a perfect translation, but it gives you a good idea if you're building a resume and things like that. You can get connected to higher education links. You can actually check out the list of Ohio's military-friendly employers that have, when they've signed up for an account on OhioMeansJobs, they said, we want to hire veterans and we're going to make a push to do that. And now there's over 6,000 of them in the state of military-friendly employers. So that's all kind of the stuff you can find on the Military Career Service Center on OhioMeansJobs. But a lot of that was built for the job seeker, but I point employers there as well. I tell employers to utilize that skills translator. If they're looking at a resume they don't understand, or they're about to interview a veteran, develop some questions. Say, hey, I plugged this into the skills translator. It says you have, blueprint and electrician skills from the military. Can you elaborate? There's ways to kind of reverse engineer that skills translator as well. And there's just other great links on there to, like I said, higher education, transfer credit, licensing and certifications, fast tracks for veterans here in the state can all be found on there as well. So there's just a great wealth of information. It's all kind of in one place now in that Military Career Service Center on the new website. Other great things with veterans, when you upload your resume to OhioMeansJobs, you go to the top of every search. So if an employer is out there just searching skill sets and zip codes, as a veteran, you go to the top of every search in that employer's database, and there's a big red, white, and blue V right next to your name that shows that you're a veteran candidate and you're at the top of the search. So just tons of great stuff they do for veterans, the veteran job seeker on that side that you can access through ohiovets.gov.
In one of my way back careers, I worked for the state of Ohio in the old Bureau of Employment Services.
Sure.
And we had our veterans reps at every one. And at that point in time, we had like 120 offices around the state. But it was a struggle. And needless to say, it was all hand note cards kind of thing. You know, there wasn't much in terms of the electronics. So this is huge. Yeah.
And, they're still out there in person as well at the local county OhioMeansJobs centers. So you can go, schedule meetings. I know a lot of them have opened back up, at least in some capacity. So, no matter what county you're in, you can find that local kind of one-stop shop for your employment services.
And I think, this is for job seekers regardless of background. They don't realize that reaching out to get help to be a good job seeker is not showing that you're not a good job seeker. It's showing actually that you're a great job seeker because you're getting the services and support that you need.
Sure. Yep. And that's kind of that military mindset when you get out to, you don't want to reach for that handout, but I'll talk to probably 90% of the people I talk to say, man, I wish I would have, talked to someone about my resume or did a mock interview because my first one was terrible and all this. So it's, hindsight's 2020.
Well, I guess if you consider it's inside information.
I know. It's free and they're there to help
you. Actually, you're finding out some secrets that nobody knows about, quite frankly, because HR is an ever-evolving world.
Yes, it is.
In regards to who they're looking for, even the approaches.
Sure.
The software is always changing. And gosh, through the last 18, 24 months, it's changed dramatically.
It still does. Yeah. If you don't hit those certain keywords on your resume, you're not going to get an interview.
Right.
And, I mean, these are the folks that are going to help you do that. And it's a great time to be a job seeker. And it's a great time to be a veteran job seeker. So get the support you need, get that resume sharpened up, and that's what they're there to do.
Well, and we had a lot of 50-plus job seekers who were veterans, and they had been out for so long they didn't even think about it. They didn't really. Well, I don't belong to the local vets, AMVETS, or any of those lodges or anything. And I'm like, that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Nope. It's just again, no.
You got that DD 214, you're set.
Exactly. That's right. That's what they're there for. So utilize those Ohio Means Job Centers. Yeah.
So Ryan, one of the other resources that we've been talking about for veterans is the Ohio Small Business Development Center and the one-stop, first stop business program, so that vets can create their own entrepreneurial opportunity. So let's go over those programs and how vets can take advantage of, guidance in opening up their small business, finding capital or mentorships or technical expertise, things that they need to be successful.
Sure. Yeah. And entrepreneurship is something big in the veteran community, especially with transitioning veterans coming out. There's that mindset already of, they've accomplished so much in the military that they want to come out and utilize that knowledge by starting a business. There's over 90,000 veteran-owned businesses here in the state of Ohio.
Wow. Okay.
Which is huge. And at the federal level, the Small Business Administration, the SBA, has what's called Ohio Small Business Development Centers around the country. Within those centers, they have veteran employment or entrepreneur specialists that you can contact if you're wanting to start a business here in Ohio or wherever you might be. And like I said, that's nationwide. It also helps to have nonprofits around town. There's a great one called Bunker Labs. It's a national nonprofit, but they have pockets here in Ohio as well. They have a local chapter here in Columbus. I think there's one in Cleveland. They're thinking of one in Cincinnati. But this is a great organization that really answers that question of, okay, you already know you want to start a business. Well, how do you do it? Where do you get the capital? And that's what Bunker Labs is there for. It's for veteran-only businesses. They do, like Shark Tank contests where you go on and pitch your business to like a panel and they give you feedback on it. But they'll connect you to the capital sources and really answer the questions of what you need to know too. So there's lots of organizations out there like that, depending on, where you might be around Ohio, but it's really The Bunker Labs one's really great. Our current Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, is a, retired Army Ranger. So, all the way from the top to the, here in the state, when it comes to owning a business, there's a lot of veteran support for that.
Great.
Yeah. We touched upon this a little bit earlier, but let's dig a little bit deeper about, the Veterans Workforce Team partnering with employers to search for qualified candidates. How does the team prepare employers? What services, training, that sort of thing is available? And it's still their funding for hiring vets.
Sure. Yeah. We try to, look at all the different aspects of hiring a veteran. I end every presentation with, hire a veteran because they're the best qualified candidate for the job. Don't hire a veteran because they're a veteran. But oftentimes it's, understanding some of that stuff. So that's where we've really created these 9 presentations that really focus on, okay, what's rank structure in the military look like? If you were an E5, like I was, I went through an airman leadership school, which was a 4-week in-residence school all about leadership and supervision, mentoring, conflict management, performance reviews, and evaluations. I never put that on my resume because I just said, oh, well, I put E5. They know that, I went through that.
Right.
And all the branches have that. And so we teach employers that as well. Like, if you see an E5, if you see an O3, they've been through Captain's Career Course that encompasses all this great leadership stuff. So it starts there, just understanding what the military is and the culture. We go through the jobs in the military. Only 1 in 7 jobs in the military are labeled as a combat specialty. Whether it's the media or the movies, there's that perception out there that we're all, throwing grenades over hills or driving tanks and all that and, running through the desert. Certainly that exists. But again, only 1 out of 7 jobs in the military are combat specialty. You know what? 1 out of 7 are also engineering. Another 1 out of 7 are logistics and supply chain management.
Right.
So it's really opening employers' eyes to those statistics and data in the military. And then it goes through, once you understand how do you interview the veteran, and providing those, we talked a little bit about that, how to create onboarding programs and mentoring programs for veterans that really help within that first year of transition into employment. But then we really focus a lot on that retention piece as well. It's been huge. Almost half of veterans leave their first job within the first year after military service. A lot of that is kind of like my story. I got out. I said, oh, okay, I need a job. I took that first job that was given to me. While I was there, I was looking for my job, right? So we get a lot of that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But there's, another half, stay within that first year. So we really encourage employers to, why are they staying within that first year? Well, there's, advanced leadership opportunities. There's on-the-job training. There's a veteran employee resource group there to support me. So really open employers' eyes to how can you not just hire, but how can you retain those veterans as well? Because once they get past that first year, once they hit that 2 or 3 year mark with the company, their retention numbers actually excel over non-veteran candidates. So how do we get to that mark? So it's kind of that whole hiring spectrum. And that's what we're out here doing, whether it's one-on-one consultation, our monthly webinars, phone calls, whatever it might be. We work with a lot of chambers of commerce to, get the word out and get some tips and tricks out there. So, that's how we're doing it. And hopefully, we'll be hitting the road here soon again to get back out there in person.
Right. Well, you've had employers calling on you. Obviously, they're making that concerted effort.
Sure.
You're knocking on doors as well, too. How are you delineating categories of businesses to go knock on doors?
Yeah, it's really everybody.
Okay.
When we first started this 5 years ago, that was the hard part is, okay, we exist now. How do we stay away from pigeonholing logistics and that sort of thing? Because it makes sense, but at the same time, that's not everything. Exactly. So that's where we worked a lot with county chambers of commerce. Especially outside the big cities here in Ohio. We're not just in Cleveland and Cincinnati and Dayton. We're going down to Athens and Portsmouth, and I was in Findlay a couple weeks ago. So we have a large area to cover. So that's where we partner a lot with some of those county level chambers of commerce, where those employment people are, the workforce development specialists. Because you're right, you can't kind of pigeonhole veterans in it. We were talking a little bit earlier that, veterans are just kind of like a microcosm of the general population. They're everywhere. And I get employers asking me all the time, do you see veterans going into one career field over another? And the answer is no. I did a study with Ohio State it's probably 2017, 2018 now, but we took a look at their student body for veterans, because there's about 2,000 veterans in Ohio State. And we said, maybe there's a college that they're leaning in towards. Maybe it's like cybersecurity or something, Nope. It was, 200 in business, 200 in engineering, 200 in arts and sciences, 100 over in, farm and agriculture. It's just all over the board. And that's what we see kind of in the employment landscape as well. So
I guess it would make sense if you're looking at somebody that's served their time, came out to do, versus a lifer.
Right. Exactly.
If they wanted to serve in the military, they'd be there for life. And then it's, that sort of thing. But they're coming out and looking for something. They did their thing and they're coming out. Yeah.
Veterans really are much more a person in transition. Just like a college student is in transition to adulthood, and a high school student is in transition to go to college. And you almost need a gap year.
Yep.
It would be nice if veterans could afford a year to just sit back and figure it out.
Yep, exactly.
But that's not going to happen.
Well, and that's why, there's a lot of initiatives, and this administration's been great with trying to reach veterans before they come back to Ohio. How did someone talk to me while I was deployed that knew I was coming back to Ohio but could start getting me those resources and opportunities and connections before I got back? So we're doing a lot on that level. So hopefully more to come on that in the near future of, because it's hard for us here in Ohio because we only have one active duty military installation, and that's right, Patterson Air Force Base. And even then they only separate about 700 service members every year. So we don't have that huge, Army installation that separates 10,000 people every year that we can just walk over to and start talking to those folks. We're kind of at a disadvantage with that. So
and I know there's been a concerted effort by Wright State to incorporate those that are at the base.
Yep.
To really recruit.
Yep. So now what we need to do is we need to get out there. We need to get to these other installations that are separating 10,000 service members where, there's probably 100, 200, 500, 1,000 coming back to Ohio from there. You never know.
Right.
And connecting with them beforehand and providing those resources.
When I was in continuing education at Ohio State, we were the SOC office. It was Servicemen's Opportunity Center. So we were basically, if a veteran wanted to go back to school, we were the place they could get started, get admitted and all that. I don't even know if that program still exists.
So it's probably more advanced now. So about 5 years ago, through the Ohio legislature, they passed House Bill 48, which was kind of known as the Veterans Bill. And it had a bunch of stuff in there. But one of the big things that had in there, it requires every public university in the state to have a veteran service office on campus. So now it's a separate office. It isn't, some of the smaller universities, it might be part of a different HR office or something like that. But, Ohio State's office has a staff of, probably 7-8 people just in their veteran service office that provide employment support, provide the GI Bill support, which also is a lot easier now. The Montgomery GI Bill, kind of the one before the new one, the post 9/11 GI Bill. So in the old days, you had to go in, you had to pay your tuition, you had to complete your course.
Right.
Then you had to go file for reimbursement with the VA. Now you fill out a form online. You say, I'm going to Ohio State. You go in there and sign a form. Your tuition's paid for in the background. It's all taken care of. Pass, fail is fine as long as it's going towards your GPA. And now you get money too. If you have the full benefits of the post 9/11 GI Bill, you get a monthly housing allowance to go back to school. You get $600 a year for books and supplies. So you're getting paid to go back to school. So that's why we see, 25,000 or so GI Bill connected students here in the state of Ohio, just because it's such a great resource and a benefit that, veterans have earned. And now it's not so much a hassle as it used to be, where you had to pay out of your own pocket, wait for reimbursement.
And
it makes it a lot easier.
Right. That was the issue because that veterans were seen as an exception at the university, not negatively, but any person who's considered to be an exception, then there's a whole lot more steps to have to follow. And so often I think they got more frustrated and walked away as opposed to, using those benefits. Yep,
sure. And it's just a lot of questions, but those offices exist now to answer. And we've been to quite a few of them around the state, and they're great. There's, veteran student lounges on campus now for veterans only to kind of go and study and things like that. So just great things in the higher education world. And even on that topic, there's still a lot of, transfer credits and transferring military experience to college credit work being done at the Ohio Department of Higher Education. And Again, at that Military Career Service Center, you can look at those updates and see what's going on there as well.
Okay. We've already sort of touched on this, but I'm going to take it a little bit further. The hardest step for a job applicant, regardless of their background, is to be able to focus in on their work story to tell an employer, what value are they bringing to the table? And this is particularly difficult for veterans because, as you said, they're talking about their team. They're not talking about themselves. They don't always know themselves how their skills translate into civilian force, let alone employers understanding that. And you've mentioned some of the things that your office is able to do, if nothing else, to educate the employers, and that there are groups out there. Can you give us some examples of things that have worked really well, some success stories you've seen on veterans getting great jobs?
Yeah, sure. And you nailed it. It's hard to tell that story and get that, I was an intelligence analyst in the Air Force. How does that translate to anything outside being an intelligence analyst in the civilian sector? And that's where my biggest struggle was. So it's working with the OhioMeansJobs app. It's seeking that help to better sharpen up that resume. And we've seen it be successful all across the OhioMeansJobs centers across the state. You can actually, on that Military Career Service Center, they have a success story link that is constantly updated with success stories of veterans going into the OhioMeansJobs centers, working with that veteran outreach specialist, and translating that work or getting a certification or, realizing what else we need to be done. Because, we make it hard on you too we have this difficulty translating skills, but 2/3 of us also want to do something completely different than what we did in the military. So
good point. I was going to ask you that. Okay.
So a lot of times it's seeking that guidance of, well, I don't want to be an intelligence analyst. What do I need to do to be an engineer? And having those conversations of, well, you need a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. Maybe it's just a certification. Maybe it's just experience. So there's just, it's a lot of just seeking out that support in the career industry to be able to just tell your story and then find the right path for you. Yeah,
that's a really good point because I guess in our mindset, we kind of go, you look at your military service as like going to college.
Yep.
As a loose analogy that,
Sure.
Okay, if you came out as an intelligence analysis, and that's probably what you want to do.
Sure.
Not necessarily as is, you could be a business major coming out of college, but no, I really want to do something else.
Well, exactly.
This was a basis. I never really thought about that. It's like, just because you went there and trained that way doesn't mean that's where your interests lie.
Right.
That's just what the military saw that you had an expertise in. You should do this for us.
And if I understand correctly, oftentimes when young folks go into the military, they want to go into the military. They don't know what they want to do. And so they're picking a career path that only has to do with, well, I want to go to San Francisco. And so it's not like, it's like, where can I do this job? Which base has this job? So,
and oftentimes the military tells you what job you're going to do as well.
True.
And that's based off the aptitude test that you take before you go in.
Yes.
But and again, it's telling that story. Like you mentioned, it's, I was an intelligence analyst, but I need to not talk about that. How about my, Microsoft Excel and, pivot table skills and my project management coordination, and my trend analysis that I did. And, that translates probably into a business analyst type position, but, you just don't know that from doing that. So it's getting that support and figuring out what you want to do and then, figuring out what you need to get there.
Well, if you were a logistics specialist in the military, you could find a job, but do you want it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And the military has different names for their jobs than, supply chain management outside the military.
Right.
So it's
right.
finding those translations. But again, is that what you want to do? Maybe it's similar. Maybe you can take skills from that and get a certification and, go a different way. So,
and I think really the value of this conversation with us is to let our listeners know that you aren't thinking thoughts by yourself. There are thousands of vets out there who are thinking the same thoughts.
Absolutely. Yep. And we hear the story every day. But there are great success stories out there too. And you can find a list of those. And we have some just on the employer side of, going over resumes with a transportation company. And we were looking over one and they said, I don't know what this means. And I said, well, that MRAP means they worked on large vehicles. They're a vehicle mechanic. And then they're like, whoa, we hire tons of vehicle mechanics. And they actually made that connection. And just because that acronym was there, they didn't know what that meant and was just about ready to pass it over. So that's what we're out there doing on the employer side as well. And we just need to work both sides of that coin.
Is part of that use of acronyms by veterans, I don't want to say it's because they don't know what it means, but it's like, that's the logical pattern of a conversation.
Yep.
The thought of spelling out what that means would never dawn on them.
Yep, absolutely. And you get so used to it in the military using acronyms. There's so many.
Yeah. Well, and IT is the same problem.
Yep. And I was in the finance industry for a while.
Sure.
And through regulations there's a ton there. You just get so used to utilizing them in the military, abbreviations and acronyms for everything. That, you get out and you think that that's just a common term and that's what gets put on the resume. So, it's seeking that resume advice and getting that support so that it doesn't go on there. And we're out there doing it on the employer side.
Yeah. Well, the pandemic's created havoc in everybody's lives, of course, but I'm sure our veterans they've had to deal with it in a different way. Your office now has the VRRAP, the Veterans Rapid Retraining Assistance Program, and that offers education and training in high-demand jobs. Can you give us some details? What job categories that are included? How do vets apply for the program? How does the training occur?
Yeah, so this is actually a federal program through the Department of Veteran Affairs, through the federal VA, that they created this Rapid Retraining Assistance Program, which provides funding to veterans and also to the trainers who are certified trainers into these categories. So the bottom line is, if a veteran has become unemployed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they can go on the VA's website and find an application to register for this VRAP program. Now they have to seek employment in one of the nation's high demand jobs, which I can tell you is pretty much everything from IT to
transportation
to just business jobs. I mean, there's not much that's not on that list.
Right.
So when you hear, it's got to meet this in-demand job, I'm telling you, there's a lot on there.
I can imagine.
So then now there's training providers, whether it's community colleges or career centers here within the state of Ohio that's gone on there as well. And they've filled out the application to become a certified training provider. So now they can connect the dots at the VA, and you as a veteran can go get training into, software development for 6 months or something, for free. And then get placed with an employer, and try to get that employment line back up. So the federal VA, has a lot more information on it. But yeah, veterans can go on there and look at the stipulations. If you're an employer as well, if you want to, become a training provider, employers can go on that as well and figure out what they need to do and what boxes they need to check for that as well. But there's a lot on there. And there's a lot of money there to provide into the program as well throughout the country, to get veterans back to work through the pandemic.
So if they go onto that website, it's a federal program, federal website. Is there somebody in your office or other location that can help them?
I'm sure there's probably someone at the local VAs around the state that could probably help them as well.
Okay.
Just being a federal program, that's going to line up more with just the federal VA. We won't have someone specific, but I mean, you can always call our office. You can always contact your county office and try to provide assistance that way too.
Okay. Well, that goes right back in our next topic, because I do want to do a shout out to our county veterans programs. They do a phenomenal job, and I always enjoyed working with the Franklin County folks. Regardless of where a vet lives in Ohio, there is a county office available to them. Can you give our listeners just a little bit of an overview of the work that you do with the county offices and the services that they provide? Sure.
Yeah. And we're pretty unique here in Ohio that we have a county veteran service office in every county. There's 88 of them. I've been to quite a few of them across the state during my travels. And I tell you what, it's such a great resource to have at the local level. If a veteran is having financial assistance, some financial troubles, a lot of times, it's filing a claim with the VA. That can be a lengthy process. Those folks are the experts in all of that. So, no matter where you're listening in from, if you're having a question about veteran benefits and resources, you need a ride to your VA appointment, whatever it might be, start at your local county veteran service office, because they're all operated sort of independently of one another. So they're all funded independently by each county. So that's great in the sense that they can tailor their needs specific to the needs of the veterans within the county.
Right.
So yeah, no matter where you're calling in from, or listening in from, you can actually go to our website, ohiovets.gov, and find a map and just click on your county, and it brings up the address and the phone number and the contact information for that specific county. And it really is a great resource, and one we're very fortunate to have here as veterans in the state of Ohio.
Good. Although there's going to be a listener that's not a veteran listening to this podcast, we know that families are the support system and sometimes are the encourager for that veteran's like, would you go? Would you go?
Yep.
Especially the wife, spouse, girlfriend for the male when it comes down to it. I've heard many stories there too. Before we end, could you provide our listeners, those non-veterans, I guess you could say, with a few tips to remember so that they can ensure all of the veterans are able to take advantage of the incredible resources that are available?
Sure. And I think, for veterans and non-veterans that might be listening, two things to really, to walk away from listening to this podcast would be the website, ohiovets.gov. That's going to have the encompassing list of every benefit and resource throughout the state, from legal assistance to employment and education, to parks and recreation discounts, to everything in between. You can find on ohiovets.gov. So that would be the first one. The second one is the other one we just talked about, is that local county veteran service office. So if you know a veteran in your county that needs that one-on-one support, let them know there is a local office, in their county that will support them. And again, that list can be found at ohiovets.gov as well. So I think those are the two big takeaways. I think if you're not a veteran listening, that's easy to remember, ohiovets.gov and the County Veteran Service Office.
Good. Wonderful. This has been amazing. Ryan, thank you so much for all of this information. We want to wish all of our veterans, listeners, and those, your family members, a healthy and safe Veterans Day. But listeners, your community, your family, your friends who are veterans who are maybe in need, particularly coming out of this pandemic. Loneliness has been an issue. Mental health issues are out there, as well as unemployment, and there are resources to help them. So make sure that ohiovets.gov. Also, on the Looking Forward Our Way website, we will have a resource sheet with all of this information. So we want to really encourage you to use it and to get that information out. And thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Veterans Day.
Thank you.